indent or request from various states. Probably the officers and the officials keeps on changing, or attrition rate is there, or maybe they have not read the our earlier OM, so that is why they keep on asking for the drugs which are no more there in being supplied by National AIDS Control Organization. And so they now I mean, after when I'll speak and after my opening remarks, you will be once again you will be told that what all drugs have been phased out, and those drugs are not going to be available in the program, and it is not under the it is not available, but you can, if at all you require it, you can purchase it from the at your own level. But NACO is not going to supply you, because the requirement at the NACO level will be so little that it is not practical to purchase or procure at our level. So that is why uh, we are not procuring those drugs. Besides that, there are certain drugs which are to be transitioned to the newer drug regime like TLD and other newer regimes. But till the old regime is utilized completely, you should not phase out any your patients to the newer regime. That is also our request, because otherwise what will happen that you will end up with the expiry of those older regime, and somebody has to take the responsibility of those expiry of the drugs. So it is better not if we judiciously act together, and then we will not, there won't be any expiry of the drugs, there won't be any stock out of the drugs. And whenever the regime will be required, it may be possible, if the older regimes are required by you, you can I mean, let us know. Although we cannot assure you that they will be available with us, we are not procuring it. But at the same time, if these are in surplus with the other states, we can shift from those states wherein these are surplus to your state, wherever it is deficient or it is required. So that may be done, but it is not always that you have to do it like that. You may share your information, but we will also tell you that these drugs are not whether available or not available, and if at all these are available, then we will shift from other states. Otherwise, you can purchase it from your end. So that is all I want to share with you. Now, over from my end. Thank you, Shweta.
Thank you, sir. I now request Manish sir to please continue the session.
Thank you very much, sir, for your remarks. Shweta, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
So thank you so much. A very good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for joining in today's NDLS session. This is a very special session where we came to know from the states and from the field level that there is a lot of confusion with respect to what drugs are being phased out. Although on June 7th, there was a letter which was shared with all the states mentioning about what drugs have been phased out and how the central procurement of these drugs will not be done any further. So this session is just to reiterate and to clarify that how do we go ahead when there is a need of such drugs, and why are we actually phasing out these drugs. So we'll be taking you through, and with me I have Dr. Manish, who will be also taking this session further with respect to drug specific which are being phased out, and we are transitioning to the DTG based regimen. So just to reiterate again that the drugs which are phased out are to be monitored by the SACS officials, CST in charge, as well as the medical officer at the ERT center. And it is the equal responsibility. The medical officer at the ERT center should regularly monitor if they have available stock of the drugs which we'll be talking about in the presentation. Then it is important that we consume them first, as DTG sir mentioned in his opening remarks, and then we gradually plan based on the whatever stock is available. We can gradually plan to transition to the DTG based regimen. So this is just for all the medical officers as well as the SACS official to ensure that these are monitored on a regular basis. And I see that the drug stock report indicates that ZLN is available at some of the pockets and some of the RT centers. The other drugs are available at a couple of centers only, so which are being phased out. So we need to monitor them regularly. That's my request to all the state and ARP officers. So moving on to the presentation. This is the list of ARV drugs which has been phased out under NACP. And when we say phased out, it means there will be no central procurement. NACO will not be procuring these drugs. And if at all we require them, then based on case to case, or if state sees that they can procure at this SACS level, if there is the quantity which is required is larger, not 1 or 2 patients, but there are more patients and can be procured at the SACS level, then that can be done by taking approval from the project director SACS. But NACO will not be procuring these drugs centrally. So this is a letter, snapshot of the letter, which was sent on 7th of June from NACO side. And these are on the left side, adult and pediatric formulations, which will no more be under central procurement. So I'll just take you through tenofovir, lamivudine, and efavirenz, PLE, will not be procured centrally. ZLN, efavirenz 600, nevirapine 200, lopinavir, ritonavir 250. These are adult formulation. These are 5 adult formulation will not be centrally procured. And pediatric, ZLN, efavirenz, and nevirapine pediatric. This will also not be procured by NACO. So moving on, just to give you a brief background about how we look at a regimen, and it consists of 3 drugs. So if we look at, there are 2 NRTIs, lamivudine, and with lamivudine is common, and we go with tenofovir or abacavir or zidovudine. And then there is the 3rd drug, which is either integrase inhibitor or PI or NNRTI. So either dolutegravir, APVR, lopinavir, ritonavir, nevirapine, or efavirenz. But as I mentioned in the previous slide, that nevirapine and efavirenz has been already phased out. So you really need to understand that what in your state, how many patients are currently on these regimen, and are these patients on these regimen because of some specific issues, or they are yet to be transitioned. So that kind of analysis and monitoring is required from the ERT center level as well as from the SACS level to handle the ERT center. So why are we actually doing these transitions, and why are we phasing out these drugs from the central procurement or under NACP? So because we all know that dolutegravir was introduced in 2020, and we have better and new drugs available under the program. So the requirement for the drugs which I just mentioned in the previous slide is very, very less. So there'll be hardly few patients who will be requiring or may be requiring these drugs, but the requirement is so small that it cannot be centrally procured. And we are transitioning the patient to NNRTI based regimen, from an NNRTI based regimen to DTG based regimen. So when we transition these patients to DTG-based regimen, and DTG is a new drug, plus it is a more effective and more potent drug. So if we talk about DTG, then why actually are we looking at DTG? And we all know, and there were previous session, NDLS sessions also, and our guideline also says that it achieves faster viral suppression. So if we look at DTG, viral suppression we attain in 4 weeks as compared to equivalence, which takes approximately 12 weeks. More percentage of patients achieve viral load suppression who are on DTG, and it has higher barrier to resistance. So it is more durable and sustainable. And it is safer because it has fewer side effects and drug-drug interactions are less. So I'll hand over to Dr. Manish to take us through drug-specific, drugs which we are phasing out from the program. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Dr. Purnima. Good afternoon, everyone. And in next few slides, we will be individually describing or discussing these drug formulations, okay, ARV formulations. And we will be just recalling that what were the use, what is the current guidance on transition, what is the guidance if stock is available at ART center, and most importantly, will this formulation will it be required as per the current guidelines, and if required, what needs to be done. So starting with tenofovir, lamivudine, and efavirenz adult, which is 300, 600 formulation. So as we all know, and I know most of the ART centers have done this, but then as Puri sir initially told that still at NACO level, at SACS level, there are multiple community representatives or members who are complaining about that these drugs not being available at ART centers. So first thing, request to all SACS and ART centers to understand that why this needs to be done if not done at your ART center. And then whenever you are transitioning or whenever the drugs are changed for a patient, also request to all medical officers and medical officers that please inform the patients or clients accordingly, so that they doesn't feel that their drug is not available and they are being given some alternate regimens. Okay, now coming back to TLE adult. So we all know previously it was the preferred drug for ART initiation, and just recently, right, all new initiations, adult patients were initiated on this particular regimen. There has been clear guidance on transition. Guidance says that all those patients on TLE needs to be tested for viral load, and if viral load done or like based on CD4 count or clinical scenario, they needs to be transitioned to DTG based. So if they are virally suppressed or immunologically like attaining good CD4 counts and clinically also well, there was a guidelines that all these patients can be safely transitioned to TLD. And those patients who were failing on TLE, where after EAC and repeat viral load, if they still fail, then the transition was ZLD under SASEP guidance. So we see that most of the centers has done this kind of transition, but still if at your center all TLE patients are not transitioned, for phase-wise transition onwards, you need to follow this guidance. If stocks are available, the guidance is utilize for any patients on TLE which are awaiting transition. You can also keep a small reserve stock for need in rare circumstances. Okay. So as per the recent newer guidelines, TLE was only recommended in one condition, where women of childbearing potential opting out of the DTG based regimen. So this is the only recommendation that is mentioned in the recent guidelines, and this will be the only scenario where TLE will be required. Okay, so there are some myths going around at ART center which I'll just like to clarify. One, TLE is not contraindicated in pregnant women or TLD is not contraindicated in pregnant women. Actually, all the pregnant women, it's just the first month which is questionable. After first months of gestation, TLD is actually recommended because of the advantages that just Dr. Purnima enumerated. Okay, so this is one thing. So TLD is not contraindicated in any pregnant woman. Even in women with childbearing potential, you have to counsel them and give them the advantages of TLD, which is faster suppression, less side effects, as compared to very nominal chances of some fetal toxicity if taken in the first month of gestation. So that needs to be explained. The patient will be taking their informed decision, and it's an opt-out. So everyone, you are offering TLD, but only those who are opting out of this TLD regimen will be requiring TLE. So we expect there will be a very smaller proportion. And if required, as mentioned by Dr. Puri sir and Dr. Purnima, it needs to be done under local procurement, okay, which can be at sex level or ART center, depending on various, which varies from sex to sex. So this is the major issue, that TLE. Okay, so most of your patient will be transitioning to DTG based regimen, either TLD if virally suppressed, and if not virally, like if failing on TLD, then the other option was given ZLD, zidovudine, lamivudine, and dolutegravir under SASEP guidance. So this was our first drug. Second drug is zidovudine 300 mg, lamivudine 150, and nevirapine 200 mg, or the ZLN adult, which we call ZLN adult in ART center. This was also a preferred drug for ART initiation in the initial phase, right? Before TLE or TLN, actually ZLN was the preferred drug. And when TLE was introduced, those patients who were initiated on ZLN continued to be on ZLN. That's why this was the second most common drug used at the ART center. Again, the guidance is very clear. All those patients who are on ZLN needs to be transitioned to DTG based regimen based on viral load. If they are virally suppressed, then also the preferred regimen will be TLD. And if they are even failing, then also the other alternate regimen will be TLD under SASEP guidance. But however, we should ensure that viral load or CD4 count and clinical scenario are documented well, so that if patient is virally suppressed as of now, the zidovudine lamivudine part, ZL part, can be reused later on if that patient requires. So this is the guidance on transition. Again, most of centers have utilized their stock, but if it is available, please utilize for any patient which are awaiting for transition, right? Again, as of the current guidelines, there are no specific recommendations for this particular regimen. You will not be requiring ZLN formulation. Okay, you may require zidovudine, lamivudine as a separate thing, but ZLN as one tablet FDC is not recommended in first line, second line, alternate line, third line, any current guidelines. So chances are very low that you will require it. Anyways, if in some exceptional cases, some tailor-made regimens are required and you need, then it needs to be locally procured. There will not be central procurement for ZLN. However, as per guideline, it's very unlikely that you will require ZLN going forward. The third drug that we will be focusing will be 600 mg, okay, or IFA adult. So again, it was present in program since long. It was used along with ZL for patients who had contraindication or toxicity to NVP. So when ZLN was the preferred regimen, at that time, if patient was developing some nevirapine related toxicity or was on rifampicin based ATT, then the recommendation said that these patient needs to be transitioned to ZLE. Okay, but however, and later on, these patients were continued to be on ZLE regimen. However, with the current treatment optimization or guidelines, it has been made very clear that all these patients who are taking efavirenz 600 along with ZL or along with AL they needs to be transitioned on DTG based regimen, as mentioned earlier, based on the viral load. If they are virally suppressed, they can safely transition to TLD. If they are failing, then zidovudine, lamivudine, or if on ZLE, again, the transition will be TLD under SASEP guidelines. SASEP guidance. Here also, we want to document viral suppression at the when we transition, just to ensure that while transitioning, ZL is still active, and in future ZL can be used or not. That is the decision which we want to document, and that's why viral load test is being recommended. If stocks are available, utilize patients which are in transition. Also can be used with TLE if you require TLE regimen for some women who are opting out of TLD in future. These are options that you can think of. Going forward, again, it's very unlikely that this efavirenz 600 mg single drug will be required. There is no specific mention of this drug in the guideline. However, again, I'll repeat, if required in exceptional cases or tailor-made cases, you require efavirenz, local procurement is the solution which is proposed. So this is regarding nevirapine. I'm sorry, there is some typo error which is mentioning efavirenz here, but however, nevirapine is 200 mg. Earlier, we were using it along with so this was also being used with tenofovir, lamivudine, and nevirapine. So for the regimen of PLN, those who were not taking efavirenz or prior to there was a shorter period of time when patients were actually being initiated on TLN as an alternate regimen. There are very small number of patients on TLN. However, again, the guidance is same. All these patients will be transitioned to DTG based regimen, either TLD if virally suppressed, and again, it depends on what regimen they are taking. If they are taking TLN, and if they are virally unsuppressed, they will be most likely will be transitioned to zidovudine, lamivudine, and dolutegravir under SASEP guidance. Again, the stock, you may use it if there are some patients. However, going forward, it's very unlikely that you will require 200 mg. There is no specific mention of any scenario where nevirapine 200 mg is required. The fifth adult drug is lopinavir 200 plus ritonavir 50 mg FDC, or we also know it as LPVR 250. It was actually preferred drug for ART initiation along with TL for HIV-2 and HIV-1 and 2. It was also recommended for all pregnant women who are now being initiated on ART and had a prior exposure to single dose nevirapine. And also this was given to children, those are on PI based regimen requiring a higher dose. So when their weight has, those were initiated on PI based regimen or transition to PI based regimen, but now their weight is higher and they can take the adult formulation. So it will continued in all these patients. Now the guidance on transition is, again, the LPVR patient needs to be transitions to DTG based regimen. So it can be, if they are on TL LPVR virally suppressed, they can easily be transitioned to TLD. And if virally unsuppressed, you need to take SASEP guidance, and the alternate will be zidovudine, lamivudine, dolutegravir, or DTG plus some PI based on the past history. So all those patients who are failing on PI, there will be more in-depth review required by SASEP. Again, if stocks are available at ART center, utilize for any patients on TLAL, ZL plus LPVR who are awaiting transition. Will it be required? So yes, it may be required in some very small cases where pregnant women or HIV-2 patient fail on DTG-based regimen. Only in these conditions it is being recommended in the current guidelines. Again, so we anticipate that again, because DTG is a recently added drug, it has more durability, more efficacy. It's highly unlikely that more number of patients are failing on DTG. However, in guidelines, if someone fails and she is pregnant or the person is HIV-2 or HIV-1 and 2, only in this scenario, this will be recommended. So we anticipate a very small requirement of lopinavir, ritonavir adult. So no central procurement will be planned, and if required for such scenarios, it will be a local procurement. Going forward for pediatric drugs, so we are discussing Zevalin pediatric, pediatric and nevirapine pediatric. Most of the things remains the same, but still I'll take you through the guidelines or the slides. So Zevalin pediatric, again for even pediatric patient, it was a preferred drug for ART initiation for like a significant time in the program. And those patients were continuing on Zevalin even after when the guidelines changed. So in the previous guidelines, in the recent guidelines, it is clearly mentioned that these patients, based on their viral load, needs to be transitioned to DTG based or lopinavir based regimen based on their age and weight. So any child who has crossed 6 years of age and 20 kgs of weight can be transitioned to dolutegravir based regimen, and those who are below this, like less than 6 years, less than 20 kgs, will be transitioned to pediatric lopinavir ritonavir based regimen. So lopinavir ritonavir is the phased out is the adult formulation, but pediatric formulation is still being there and is under fresh supply also. So based on viral suppression, it will be transition to either TLD or ALD or ALLPVR based on the age and weight of child. And if failing, you need to refer it to SASEP for alternate regimens, considering all the past history of the patient. If stocks are available, utilized for any patients who are awaiting transition, we don't think there are much of the scenarios where you will be requiring ZLN pediatric in future. So as of now, the guidelines are focused on using PI-based regimen or even preferred the dolutegravir-based regimen, and abacavir lamivudine is preferred the NRTI backbone also. So most of the patients will be on those regimen, and it's very unlikely that you will require ZLN pediatric in the ART recent guidelines. Similarly, efavirenz 200 also, it was similarly used with ZL and AL pediatric for children who were about 3 years and 10 kgs prior to the PI-based regimen were preferred. Again, the guidance is similar. It needs to be transitioned to DTG based or lopinavir based regimen based on their viral load, based on their age and weight. So all those children above 6 years below and above 20 kgs will be going on dolutegravir based regimen, most probably abacavir lamivudine and DTG or tenofovir lamivudine DTG if they have crossed 30 kgs and 10 years also. So based on their viral load, age and weight, you will be transitioning, but then they will not be continued on efavirenz. It will be dolutegravir based regimen or lopinavir ritonavir based regimen for pediatric. For available stock, the guidance remains the same, and for whether it will be required, again, it's very unlikely that you will require efavirenz 200 mg in some specific cases. And similarly, with nevirapine, everything remains same. They need to be transitioned to dolutegravir based or PI based regimen based on their viral load, age and weight. And for these pediatric cases, to all ART centers, if you have any query please feel free to reach out to the your SEX or the associated PCOE or NACO for further clarification. But these transition needs to, as I mentioned multiple times, it needs to be after considering viral load, age, and weight of the child. Again, nevirapine 50 mg, it's very unlikely in as per the newer guidelines. And all these drugs, ZLN pediatric, efavirenz pediatric, and nevirapine pediatric, in case they are required for some exceptional cases, which we do not anticipate much, there needs to be a local procurement under the guidance of respective sex. So these are some points on transition. So I'll just, this is, I think Dr. Purnima also mentioned these. So please ensure that any transition of regimen is accompanied with a viral load test. So whenever you are transitioning from one regimen to another regimen, either due to or drug, either due to toxicity, either due to guidelines, or due to failure. Obviously failure, you will have viral load. So either due to guidelines or toxicity, please have a viral load test. This will be helpful in documenting that current regimen is effective, and these drugs, if required, can be reused in future after 5, 6, 7 years, whatever, whenever patient requires. So a viral load at the time of transitioning of particular drugs or regimen is very important and is recommended in the guidelines. Second thing is regular monitoring of ARV drug stock status should be done by medical officer and SEC CST in charge. We have seen some cases, some SECs where one particular drug was available at some other ART center, but kind of less in stock in other ART centers. So within state monitoring and management of supply chain is needs to be done by SECs, and all medical officers are requested to have a close coordination with your SECs in charge. As Dr. Puri sir mentioned, the transition of PLHIV from phased out drugs should be done after consumption of the available stocks of these drugs, so that you don't end up with a huge number of expired or unutilized stock. Many of the most of the ART centers have done this, but still based from the weekly report, we are seeing that some ART centers are still having these drugs and reporting under in the their stock report. And last important point is regular monitoring of pediatric patients for their age and weight, and transition to other regimen based on their age and weight band. So guidelines now recommend active. If a child of which is below 6 and below 20, 6 years and 20 kg was on abacavir, lamivudine, and LPVR, when that child crosses this age and weight band, means he or she is between 6 to 10 years and 20 to 30 kgs, his regimen needs to be transitioned to AL plus dolutegravir. And when a child moves from this weight band and crosses 10 years of age and 30 kgs of weight, he or she needs to be transitioned to TLD. Now, all these transitions will be accompanied by viral load, and whenever viral load is unsuppressed, you need to take a guidance of expert. Okay, so this is the guidance mentioned in the national guidelines, which are recently released. So please ensure that this is being done, this active transition of pediatric patients based on their age and weight. So thank you. For any query, please feel free to write to your concerned SACs, RCs, PCOE, COEs, or you can also write to NACO, and the email ID of Dr. Purnima is mentioned here. If you have certain queries on this particular subject, you feel free to write in. We will consult experts and will definitely get back to you with the most logical and practical solutions for that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Purnima ma'am, can we open for question answers now? Manish, can we take up question answers now from the participants?
Yes, madam. Yes.
Yes. Participants can now unmute their mic and ask questions. Please feel free to write in the chat box as well. There's one question in the chat box. What about DTG plus lopinavir ritonavir 250 mg?
DTG plus LPVR will be, again, I have mentioned, it will be required for a very small proportion. It will be other protease inhibitor. So you are talking about this PI plus integrase inhibitor combination. So it will be, if used in the third line or alternate second line, it will be mostly darunavir, ritonavir or atazanavir, ritonavir. In the current guidelines also it is mentioned, and there is only one or two conditions where there is a pregnant woman who is failing on kind of DTG based regimen. In only those cases, lopinavir, ritonavir with the higher dosage of DTG will be recommended. Again, all this decision, all alternate alternate second line and third line will be taken at SASEP level. So if required, SASEP will definitely guide and you can do the local procurement. But I don't think in the first line at ART center level, there will be any specific requirement of LPVR.
One more question in the chat box. What about the recent orders to shift patients from AL plus DTG to AL plus ATVR? All our shifted patients are complaining about nausea, vomiting, and with deranged LFTs.
So I do not recall any such order. There has been no order of transitioning AL DTG to AL ATVR. Okay, that you might have done due to some local stock level issues. But again, this was no guidance on this particular thing. Patient needs to be on DTG based regimen and not on ATVR based regimen.
Next question in the chat box. If pregnant woman substituted to LPV based regimen, should she be shifted back to ATZ based after delivery?
Yes, I think that is the guidance in the guidelines as well.
One more question in the chat box. We are unable to do viral load testing for those with poor adherence on TLE. What can be done for that?
Answer to Ernakulam, please, if there are operational issues, please talk with concerned SACs and try to resolve operational issues. However, there has been guidance from NACO that even if you are not able to do viral load based on CD4, based on clinical condition, you can actually transition. But however, if it is coupled with poor adherence or one unsuppressed viral load, it's better you should refer this case electronically to SASEP and take a best possible next step. Okay, so there are multiple options. You can please ensure that all the information on CD4, serial CD4 count, clinical staging, and viral load test, if done previously, are shared with SASEP and take a call. Okay. Yes, so this is a question from ART Center Tumkur, that patient on ALD, once they are more than 10 years and more than 30 kgs, do they need to transition to TLD? Yes, they need to transition.
So the next question in the chat box. After substitution to TLD, patients' sugar level goes to alter. In that case, patient not comfortable with TLD.
So
okay, that's
again, this is a common question being raised, and many of the doctors also think that TLD is being contraindicated in diabetic patient or creates higher sugar levels. So I'll say there is no specific contraindication of use of TLD in diabetic patients or with patients on patients with showing higher sugar level. The only thing is, so one thing is if patient is on TLD, you need to monitor sugar level properly. If they are rising, you need to manage as any other, like I do not think it is specific to TLD. In most of the cases, if it is, then in that only few cases you will require that kind of changes. However, rise in sugar needs to be managed as per the guidelines, which has been for the control of diabetes and all. The only thing that you need to concern when patient is with high sugar and diabetic and you are also giving TLD is the dose of metformin needs to be below 1000 gram per day if co-administered with DTG. So that is the only thing that we need to consider regarding this. There is one more question I was seeing, that what about LPVR pediatric, someone was asking. So LPVR pediatric is available in the program as of now, and it is being supplied. And sorry, I have like missed few of the cases. I think yeah. So this okay, so again this question is there, that AL plus DTG to AL plus ATVR, all our shifted patients are complaining. Okay, so this was in response to the critical drug, critical stocks of drugs. I think now when the drug stocks are restored for a Becavir or like a single DTG, you can shift those patients back to the AL DTG regimen.
So do I read out from the chat box?
Yes, ma'am. So
Yeah.
where we have
Yeah. Is there any other regimen for the patients who failed in the third line regimen? Earlier, the patient was on ZLN, then TLD. After that, DRV, RTV plus DTG. Still, the viral load is raising.
Shwetaji, can you just
Ji.
which one? Okay, this. What? Okay, so all these cases where third line is kind of failing, again, the guidance is see adherence, and again, there is no simple guideline for managing these patients. You need to refer these patients immediately to SASEP and even NASEP, and it will be dealt on case-to-case basis based on what particular regimen they have taken. Generally, the next option will be the salvage one, and the dose of DTG is improved. But again, this decision will not be at ART center level. It will be done under by SASEP or either NASEP with a proper expert consultation. So if you have any such cases at ART plus, you need to bring it to the knowledge of SASEP, and if required, NASEP as well.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from the participants? Please feel free to unmute your mic. So I'll take up the next question in the chat box. Patients on HIV2 on PI, can we transition them to DTG?
So Tumkur, yes. Patients on HIV2 who are on PI, if they are on LPVR based regimen, actually you have to transition them to DTG. ATVR, those who are on ATVR based regimen, you will get a guidance soon. But yes, all these patients who are on PI based regimen, they will be ultimately transitioned to DTG because dolutegravir is active against HIV1 as well as HIV2. So all this was done when we were using NNRTIs, but with integrase inhibitor, there is harmonization of the regimens. There is one more question on, as per guidelines, LPVR is the preferred drug for newly initiated cases for less than 6 years and less than 20. What is the preferred drug where case pediatric drug is not available? So again, I'll just reiterate that pediatric lopinavir, ritonavir is the fresh supplies has been made available from NACO. Please coordinate with, and most of the stores have received it. Please coordinate with your concerned SACs. And there is no alternate guideline for this. Okay, it is the lopinavir ritonavir is the only, as of now, only preferred drug for this cases like less than 6 years and less than 20 kgs. There is no alternate guidelines for these patients. But if you, I think the stock situation of LPVR pediatric has improved. Please coordinate with your SACs. Even NACO has allowed local procurement if required. But however, recently the stocks has supply has been resumed. Please coordinate with SACs if your center does not have a sufficient stock.
Next question in the chat box. Whenever there is a shortage of TL, can we use AL temporarily and then shift them back to TL once we get these stocks? Also, can we do viral load for such patients if total adherence is good?
So going forward, I'll take about going forward. So if there is a shortage of TL, ideally all these patients, like, now think which are the patients you have on TL. So TL plus N, you do not have any patients now, ideally. Okay, the only patients you are using TL is TL ATVR, right? Only these were the patients. Ultimately, these will be transitioned to TLD once you receive the NACO OM. But yes, in case of shortage, you have given shortage of TL, you have temporarily shifted them on AL. Now, yes, you can shift them back to TL once you have got these stocks. And you have very rightly mentioned, so whenever there is this kind of shift, please ensure viral load is being done for such patient, so that you are sure, and later on, wherever there are issues of viral unsuppression, or later on, wherever some other medications are required, even the SASEP or the experts are kind of confident on the activity of the used drug. So whenever you shift them back, it's ideal to have a viral load.
Participants are requested to please unmute their mics and ask questions, so they can also type in the chat box. Sir, I don't think there are any more questions.
Okay, Shweta, then I think we can.
Purnima ma'am, can we conclude the session?
Yes, we can. If there are no questions, we can conclude.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Yeah. Good afternoon, ma'am.
I just want to know if, lopinavir is being phased out. Do we have to keep lopinavir for any particular patient? Like HIV2, we are going to transition. And other patients, second line patients on LPVR, we are transitioning them to ATVR. Is there any scenario wherein we have to continue LPVR? Just wanted to know.
So some only scenario will be these pregnant women failing on DTG based regimen, or HIV2 failing on DTG regimen as per the recent guidelines. So we do not see many of the patients. So once you don't need to reserve, again, you need to consider how much is the expiry and how much quantity. You may have some availability of LPVR if it is a long expiry, but you should not be kind of reserving a large stock with a short expiry. Okay? So it depends from case to case, but you won't see many of the patients. Most of them can be easily transitioned to dolutegravir based regimen.
So we can start, we can transition almost all the patients, you mean?
Yes, eventually, but please utilize the existing stock first.
Okay. And we will not be getting lopinavir, ritonavir pediatric tablets anymore, sir.
So, Madam, from NACO side, the fresh supply has started. You need to coordinate with local sets to get it on priority.
Okay. What about pellets, sir?
Pellets also, the recent the supply also has the pellets. It's mostly under QA.
So the pediatric formulation has pediatric formulation of LPVR tablets 125 as well as pellets 40-10. They will be available under the program and will be available through centrally we'll be providing you. Only the LPVR adult is being phased out.
Okay.
Reiterating that adult is being phased out.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
So we have a few questions in the chat box. One is regarding the side effects of DTG. Patients are not convenient and would like to opt out. So what can be done in such cases?
So generally, basically, there are not any serious side effects of DTG, even in guidelines, but the alternate will be PI, and that will be ATVR if at all you need to transition patients of DTG due to side effects of DTG. Okay, but then we are not seeing it that common. But some patient exceptional cases you require, then the alternate for DTG is the atazanavir ritonavir, which is available with the most of the centers.
I think this question was just answered by Purnima ma'am. What regimen to start if pediatric lopinavir RT not in stock for new pediatric patient?
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so supplies have already started. We'll be getting it in this month itself. So I don't think that will be an issue for new patients anymore.
There is no alternate for these kinds of patients. Only as of now, the only regimen is lopinavir ritonavir based, because these pediatric patients, you do not have many of the drug formulations, right? For the smaller weight pen, only LPVR you are.
Sir and ma'am, can we wait for another 5 minutes in case people
Hello,
are
madam.
typing?
Hello, madam.
Yes, ma'am.
We had patients on LPVR regimen. Those who were pregnant and were exposed to single dose nevirapine, they were put on LPVR. We have to transition them also to DTG regimen, right, sir?
But they are not pregnant anymore as of now,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And even when pregnant women also, you need to transition them to DTG.
Yes.
DTG is safe in pregnancy, right? So to transition them to DTG based regimen, there you should not be worrying, right?
No, I was just thinking if we have to reserve this DTG for future use, we will be transitioning them to DTG right now. One option will be lost. No, I was just thinking in those terms. So I asked.
Options, madam, if you do a proper viral load at that time when you are transitioning, you will be documenting and you are not going to lose the options. Okay?
Yes,
If you
yes.
are not
Yes.
doing viral load and just transitioning without a viral load, then the option is lost and we will in future will not be known. Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's why we are reiterating multiple times. All these transition needs to be accompanied with
Yes.
viral load. If virus is suppressed, you can transition safely. There is no big queries.
And we can reintroduce them whenever required.
Whenever required in future, yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much.
Any more questions from the participants? You can please unmute your mic or you can type in the chat box. So I don't think now there are any questions. Thank you, Puri sir, for the opening remarks. Thank you, Purnima ma'am and Manish sir, for facilitating this session. Thank you to all the participants for patient listening. We'll conclude the session now.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.